morning. I'm Debbie Wasden, Senior Vice President at the Burning Glass Institute. And thank you for joining us for the Skills First Hiring and Promotion is the Corporate Advantage session this morning. This is an important session for this conference because it is a session that is really designed to bring in the corporate voice, the voice of business in understanding what it takes to take a skills-first approach to access and mobility, what is working, what is challenging, and how our partners learning and listening from their corporate partners so that they can be better aligned with workers and their community. So as I mentioned, I'm Debbie Wasden. I work for an organization that is a research, I like to call it think and do tank, at the intersection of the future of work and the future of workers. We've had the pleasure of doing really innovative research that is challenging how you use data and insights to serve as a translator in helping spur innovation and action and supporting workers to get access to good jobs, to be able to rise and to be successful. So about a year and a half ago, we released a tool, an index called the American Opportunity Index, really under the idea of what can be measured, can be managed. And we took what we call an outcomes-based approach to this, where we looked at the lived experiences of almost 5 million workers, and were able to pull out and understand how workers who are working in jobs at the Fortune 500 companies, are America's largest companies, are they able to get on the ladder? Can they get access to these jobs? Are they able to climb that ladder? Are they able to stay on the ladder? And this year, we were able to look at, are they able to climb that ladder equitably, looking at race and gender on mobility. And what we were able to show is that corporate practice actually really matters very much. And it has enormous implications around things like retention, and culture, and that the companies who are really intentional about supporting workers we're seeing it in the outcomes through things like workers getting better jobs when they leave, staying much longer, being able to access jobs when they don't have a college degree and things like that. We also put out a report recently around skills first hiring, where so many companies over the last 5 years have started to understand what skills first hiring is, understand that they want to increase the pool of talent that they give access to these jobs, and that doing that through skills and removing or reducing the degree requirements and barriers to these jobs is a first step to being able to do that. When we actually looked at what's happened since so many companies made these announcements, what we noticed is that companies did in fact reduce or remove the degree requirements, but very few companies actually hired more people without a bachelor's degree for those. And in fact, almost a majority of companies either started by trying and then reverted back to their normal practices of hiring people with bachelor's degrees for roles that are now not requiring, or in many cases, they actually reverted to hiring more people with bachelor's degrees for these roles. And what that kind of shows is that we can now look and measure things that have felt very difficult to measure and look at where are we making progress on many of the aspirational efforts that we're all trying to do to support workers. But two, that without some institutional structures and change within companies and in the supports around these companies, that this type of change effort is difficult. And it's not necessarily sticky just because we make an announcement. It actually takes some time and some implementation to have that permeate and take hold. So with that introduction, I'm very excited to introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm joined by Marty Martinez at the end, Chief Partnerships Officer from Guild, Randy Tosch, Vice President of Talent from Grainger, and Steve Lee, Chief Executive Officer for SkillUp Coalition. And I'm gonna start with Randy. Grainger was a number 3 on the American Opportunity Index. This is not an index that you opt into. It's one that we looked at the profiles of millions and millions of workers and actually looked at what happened from these lived experiences over time. So we called Randy and said, congratulations, you are doing amazing. I'm pretty sure the reaction was, who are you? But that's fine. And so they actually had to sort of understand, what did we see? Because we didn't ask for their data. And what we asked for them, and what I'll ask for you today, is sort of, why is Grainger number 3 on the American Opportunity Index? From where you, what are the, how are you cracking the code to supporting talent?
Sure. Yeah, good morning. It was an exciting award to win because Grainger has been on, I would say, on a mission to try to get our brand out there as an employer for several years. We're often described as a best kept secret. So this one was exciting because we didn't actually apply for it. We were recognized based on data that you saw in the experience for team members at Grainger. And so I would say several years ago, we started work on our culture and defining principles for what do we expect of everybody at Grainger. Things like starting with the customer, really embracing curiosity, we've embedded that in our culture over the last few years. The other thing that I'd say is we have a huge focus on team member development and mobility. So we find it's best to hire early on in people's career and really help them learn our business, learn our customer, and we're very focused on development planning. So every leader in the company has a responsibility to be working with the people on their team to help them build out a development plan that's in role, as well as thinking about what future roles they aspire to, and how do we get them the skills, capabilities, and experiences to get there. And so a majority of our leadership roles are actually filled internally with talent at Grainger. It's not to say we shouldn't be hiring from the outside too, but and we do, but we really have a focus on developing folks internally.
What, is it a surprise?
No. I have to say, I mean, that's the experience that you feel at Grainger. A lot of people have had long tenure at the company and have had those development experiences and have worked across different areas of the business.
Awesome. So Marty, Guild sort of works at the intersection between employers and education. How are you helping employers see the ROI for these types of investments? How are you helping them take this into the business side?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that matters as you're trying to partner at the very beginning of relationships and explaining what that looks like, but then throughout the life cycle of a partnership, kind of being able to prove out that ROI, that it's actually coming to fruition the way you described it. And the way we've found this to be most successful is really taking a fairly bespoke approach. You have to really deeply understand what these employers are looking to do with their program. What are their objectives? What things matter to them? We kind of have a generic starting point to get the dialogue started, but Randy, you brought something up that is really du jour for a lot of the partnerships that we're in, which is around mobility, and that is very easy to measure. And it has a lot of intangibles around employer value proposition. You talked about the cultural aspects of it. But where it resonates most is in really hard to fill roles, right? And so we see this with our healthcare partners, probably most prominently, around when they have the nursing shortages that a lot of healthcare systems are dealing with, that translates really directly into revenue for that healthcare system, right? They have to shut down beds, et cetera. And they have this kind of internal talent pool that is ready, willing, able to fill these roles with the right level of training and skilling and investment in them. And so these programs kind of help them get from point A to point B, and then that ROI kind of proves itself out. But again, it's very dependent on what their objectives with the program are, because the believability of the ROI at the end of the day is what the decision makers in HR are really gonna hold your feet to the fire on.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you sort of help employers measure that value add in different ways, do you see the relationship between your corporate partners start to evolve?
Certainly. And I think getting in the middle of really kind of difficult problems for them, I think that the skilling kind of trend is going to be driven by mega trends. I think healthcare and the healthcare shortages make it really easy value propositions to go and describe why they should be investing in skilling and education within a company. I think we see the same thing at manufacturing companies now, electric vehicles, et cetera, because the talent's not out there in you can't hire it. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes a pretty obvious answer that skilling is the way to do it, and they already have the people. And so they're also really tough problems, right? So you can't throw typical L&D tools at it and expect it to solve itself. So I think those mega trends, obviously AI took us almost 10 minutes before we said AI on this panel, is going to be a thing, right? Because now everybody, now skilling and upskilling applies to everybody. And so that mega trend, I think, is going to drive people's comfort level with saying, somebody doesn't have the skills today, we can provide the skills, and then they can execute the tasks and jobs of the next role of the future.
I would just say real quick,
Go ahead.
one thing I think Guild and other organizations do is make it much more accessible to people. So the academic advising, how to go through the process of applying, how to take advantage of financial aid. I think there's a lot of things that, as we've started those partnerships, it's been really helpful for our team members. Yeah.
So this is a great segue. So Steve, you are in the business of helping to match and connect training pathways. And so you are sort of a hub in the middle between workers and employers and training providers and all the different partners. First, I'd ask, how are you hearing and like listening and responding to your corporate partners? But second, how do you help support going from sort of a individual relationship with Randy and helping to support him to a sort of more multi-employer system level listen and response?
Great question. The first thing that comes to mind, this is going to sound weird, is I think about Marie Kondo. So I'm going to explain that in a second. So we're a direct-to-consumer platform, right? So we're a bit different because we're focused really on the supply side. Now, skills first is really, really important. But I feel like skills is table stakes in the world we live in. Now, the table is only like 10% full, right, to be honest? And so there's lots of stuff that we have to do to add to that plate. But we're trying to hardwire the skills environment. What I think is really hard is hardwiring the mind, the behaviors and the motivations. And that's what we try to do as best we can, right? And so we have a partner, Charles Koch, that thinks about purpose. What's your purpose in work, right? What's your curiosity in work? There's some research around like interests and awe and then joy. Like what motivates you to be your very best? And what we try to do is you try to figure out where you fit on that motivational pathway so that not only will you have the skills, but then the motivation to not just get your first job, which is important, right? But we want people to have a career. And I'm sure these two folks will say career in a company depends a lot upon these motivational behaviors because skills often are just table stakes. And so that's what we try to do, right? And we try to work with multiple employers to do that. It's very hard, right? The thing that we need to figure out as a direct-to-consumer is how do we make sure that folks have the right skill set? That's actually really hard. and we have to change taxonomies. But just as important, we think, for all the employers, because they want folks to come in who are going to succeed and stay, is how do we pinpoint those motivations that are going to allow them to be their very best within a company. That's what we try to do. Extremely difficult. There's lots of work to be done, even just on the skill side, right? But I think motivation is, I say something missing in the conversation, is how do we change, how do we hardwire the minds, which is the hardest thing to do.
From where you're sitting at Grainger, kind of getting a little bit specific, like are there specific programs or investments that you've made that sort of exemplify success or your learning in how you invest in talent or make progress towards some of these sort of innovative ways?
Sure. So majority of the roles that we hire for don't require a college degree. And when people get into the company and they've been there for a couple of years and they start to think about what do I want to do next, educational partnership is a huge piece for us. So being able to help facilitate people going and getting advanced education if that's of interest to them. But another big piece is what you just described, the sort of what I would say is like soft skills. So really helping people to understand what is it they're interested in doing, what are some of those skills that help them develop to get there. So we put in place a badging program. It's 5 badges. It's on demand, asynchronous, so people can take coursework to understand the skill. Their leader verifies it. They get a badge. After they complete 5 badges, they've completed the program. That helps build bench for DC leadership roles, warehouse leadership roles. And so we also put all leaders through an aspiring leader program and then a leadership essentials program. So we really believe, again, I said before, but it's really part of our culture. Like we make those investments in talent and we see that it pays off.
So building on that, Marty, and we'll mix it up a little bit. Guild has traditionally been, has partners that I think lead to more 4-year degrees. In this sort of skills first revolution, as we think about how we support different types of employers and different types of needs, how are you thinking about skills translation?
Yeah.
And how that can sort of lead to different types of pathways?
Yeah, it's a great question. And our legacy at Guild was to start with higher education, 4-year degrees, but only about 50% of our marketplace today is actually degree-based. A lot of short form and skilling programs in there because we saw the need. And you can kind of see it on the consumer side too. As you put stuff into those catalogs, a lot of employees will choose that over degree pathways. And I think it's partially because of they want speed to impact. And I think there's this like false dichotomy of like, is it skills or is it degrees? And we don't engage in that conversation because I think a degree is just a wrapper with which you can deliver skills, and like those two things are apples and oranges. And so there is some cognitive dissonance there, and we usually in early conversations with employers, we have to help them think through that of, if I just remove degree requirements, why would I provide degrees as a benefit? And so you have to kind of break that logic a little bit, and because it's easy to fall into that trap. But I think you touched on something, Randy, that is something I just wanted to highlight, which is the places where our employers have frontline managers that really have the conversations, that's where we see mobility happen at exponential kind of instances. Our average partnerships, when people are enrolled, they get 3x more likely to get promoted or change roles, which is kind of like how we know we're being successful. But in places where frontline managers are actually the tip of the spear of the conversations in the way you described at Grainger, you can see that be as high as 6x, and it's because of the cultural aspects that you're talking about. And so we see both sides of that. In some cases, the coaching conversations we'll have is, hey, I want to sign up for this program. I don't want my manager to know because they'll assume I'm trying to leave this team. Mm-hmm. Bad culture in regards to mobility. versus your manager saying, hey, how are you thinking about your career? Do you know about this benefit? Here are some different tools. You should go talk to a guild coach to think about what your next steps are. Very, very different outcomes. And so I think that is one that is not always super obvious around how much influence frontline managers have in this skills-first hiring.
And as you mentioned, you have a majority of roles that are that don't require a bachelor's degree today. For anybody on the panel who engages with partners who have a majority of roles or many roles that do require a bachelor's degree, are you? Maybe I'll ask this to Steve and then I'll have a follow-up question. Do you have to is that resonating? Because I feel like we still have a bifurcated discussion between skills-based, meaning degree removal, versus skills-based, meaning let's make sure that all learning counts and we can support individuals.
Yeah, I'm going to be maybe a little controversial in this, in that, yeah, SkillUp targets those who don't have a college degree. That's what we do. But the reality is, I think there's two sides of the coin. On the one hand, I think employers say they want to hire skills first, but the research doesn't say that. Burning Glass research, the SHRM data says 90% of companies say they want to do a great job, but only 10% actually do. So there's a huge dissonance. On the same side, workers, which is our jam, I feel like there's high expectations, right? They expect this, right? But they can only probably get here, right? And so I sometimes feel, and this is true, sometimes our workers that we serve have a higher expectation of their ability than they actually have, which is why training is really important. You got to have people get trained because companies aren't going to hire folks with the skills, right? That's what they're around. And so I think both sides of the equation, both the worker side and have to do both better, right, to be able to meet. And I sometimes feel like the worker side, they need to do better too. We need to do better. We need to do better, right? To lift them up to a place where they actually do have the skills that meet their expectations, so the companies will hire. And right now, workers aren't. The expectations are too high sometimes. So that's. I feel like both sides have issues, and we need to fix it. But it's not just employers that have things to fix. The worker side also has things to fix as well.
What would be helpful to you from employers or employer coalitions that could help you or partners like you be more effective?
I would say no BS. Right? No, seriously, right? There's a lot of BS out there. I'm just being honest, right? And so if we know from Grainger or from Target, this is what we exactly need. This is for real. This is not just putting a job profile, a job candidate on a website. This is for real, right? We're going to hire these folks. This is what we need specifically, and then we and the will do our darndest, right, to meet that need. But I don't think that's happening. I feel like employers put some stuff out there, and it's a bunch of BS. Some of it's BS. They know they're not going to hire those folks. They know that they're going to hire a college grad. They already know it because the incentive structure is such and the inertia is such that there's no reason for them to take any action besides what they've always done, zero reason. And so I just want no BS is basically my answer.
This is exactly why I said I think it's going to be driven by megatrends, because that is always true when you have cybersecurity and you have somebody who has a degree in that and you have somebody who has this raw skills that you can maybe get there. The easy, lazy answer is to take the more known quantity.
Right.
When you're in a situation where you don't have a plethora of applicants with this credential, now you have to get creative. And then if you get creative there, you're going to go, oh, I actually cracked the nut on how to do this. Where else can I kind of deploy this motion? And so those places where that's kind of what we look for of how do we tackle your hardest workforce problem that probably ties back to macroeconomic kind of workforce trends and shortages. And we're in a conversation right now with a very large company that wants to, they depend a lot on pharmacists. The retail company depends a lot on pharmacists, and they cannot hire them. and they know that pharmacists drive traffic into their store. And so, we've tried to do skilling programs with them in the past, but this was the thing. They said, if you can help us solve this problem, we'll break the degree requirements. This is the thing that matters to our business. It goes back to your first question, Deb, around ROI and all of those things. So I think that's going to really force people to get comfortable with it, and then you can apply it kind of backwardsly to the places where it's easier.
And I think the role that employers need to play and HR can play a big role in is defining what the roles are, defining what the skills are that are needed for those, and making those accessible and available. So if it's somebody who's on site with customers managing their inventory for us, do they have experience kind of understanding the customer and providing customer service support? Are they able to problem solve? Are they, do they have experience where they've actually counted and managed inventory? That makes it very tangible, so then you can help train people, to be able to step into those roles.
I'm pushing on that a little bit. So getting kind of specific, when you're talking about small to mid-sized employers, I feel like you can identify a need. You can ask, what is your need? And then it's a little bit easier to respond to that need with supports. When you're talking about very large companies like yours, who have lots of different needs, many, many roles, how does change take place? Like you have a CHRO, head of people, you have all learning and development, you have hiring managers, you have all the heads of business units. Like, how do you see like partners like this being able to sort of hear your needs and then be able to be helpful in responding?
Yeah, a couple thoughts come to mind. One is, we've had the alignment and support from our leadership team to define the principles for our company, to kind of define what experiences they think people need to get over the course of their career to really understand our business end to end. And that makes it easier for us then to define what the skills are for those roles to create more of that mobility. So I think that leadership commitment is really key. And then I think it's on the HR functions, I mentioned that before, and the learning functions to define what are those skills that you're training people for and make that visible. Put that in your job descriptions, because that's what you go off of to help, right, to kind of build your database of here's how we train people and match them to the right opportunities.
Can I say something on this?
Of course.
So my dad has a principle which I've always believed in. He calls it the Whiffen principle, like what's in it for me? Because that's how humans are wired, like what's in it for me? And so I remember a conversation we had with Amazon a couple of years ago, and the way they set their incentive structure for HR folks to hire is that your bonus depends on hiring skills first at the warehouse level. So that incentive structure will drive someone to like, otherwise, why would they ever do it, right? And so the Whiffen principle is really loud for me. And I love the way Amazon is thinking about it. And I would assume most companies don't have that. But I just wanted to add that as like an incentive structure, which I thought was pretty interesting.
I think about that a lot, where as you think about partnerships, and many of us in the room are very dedicated to thinking about partnerships. I think a lot about strategic partnerships and bi-directional partnerships. In many respects, I think we often turn to our employer partners who have a very important voice in our work, and we say, what do you need from me? And you say, I need more cybersecurity people, or I need fill in the blank, more health techs. And then we run off and go and do things that we think we are responding to you on. But in many respects, we don't bring you back in to say, thank you for helping me, but like, how am I helping you? And does it matter to you what we're doing, and is it sort of closing the loop? Marty, for the room here, I like to think about sort of helping people take actions and think about what can be done based on this conversation. What would you sort of ask the room today to think about, challenge them as they're engaging with employers or skills first work?
Yeah, I think, financial services industry is probably the furthest down the road in this skills hiring. I think they've bought a lot of tools. I think they are now trying to untangle and make sense of it all. I think thinking about skills tagging and skills taxonomy and how data systems will talk and use those, and skills wallets, and all of these things that kind of like at these conferences we like to throw out there as the future of what's coming, is a two-edged sword. It is both adds complexity and doesn't really, like, the through line back to the ROI now becomes very convoluted. And so I would ask this room to think about how complicated we are trying to make it on the back end. I think we have to make the next logical step simple for employer partners. It's a hard problem already. And so if we make the what you have to go do really complicated, and I'll just tell you, we use Lightcast right now. We're tagging skills because some people are going down that path. And it's not a lot of them, but it's enough of them that we can't ignore it. And so we're starting to do some of that work, but don't make the real benefits to this dependent on a daisy chain of really hard stuff that sit behind it that just makes an HR professional's job even that much harder. So simplify what the next step looks like.
If I could just add, I think that's spot on. Like, I would love to see us move to a talent marketplace that matches people to opportunities. There's a lot of inputs that go into that, and you have to think about every single role and skills for every single role. And by the time you define them in leverage AI to kind of match people, the job has changed.
They've changed.
And
Yep,
so
exactly.
I think that's a key thing, is we have to think about like the ability to scale and not have it become irrelevant.
So on that note, like, how do you, and everybody can't work with you. And actually one of the biggest observations I have is everybody wants to work with you. And that makes your life actually quite difficult because you have to have a team navigating all the different partnerships, like what you were just mentioning, Marty, where it's like, it's almost the onus on you to be able to figure out how you slot in different types of partnerships in this way. Many with good intentions of all trying to help you in the same different ways. How do you help this room sort of better understand sort of how and where, what employers need to have successful partnerships?
I mean, I would come back to being curious and really like asking. I think you said something earlier of like, you need to understand the problems, but then you can't go off and design and work and come back. Like, doing it in partnership is really valuable because you end up coming up with something that works, right? And if you can do that with a couple companies, I think that makes a big difference.
Can I add something on this? So I'm going to share another Amazon story. So every day Amazon gets pitched 20, 30, 40 groups like SkillUp. So, hey, let's partner. Like, literally every single day. And like, hey, dude, you better have a special sauce. Give me what I freaking want, otherwise I ain't going to partner with you. And I think sometimes we like to castigate employers. That's what this whole thing is. We're going to castigate these folks because they're not doing a good enough job. There's some truth to that. But I feel it's like sometimes us, like two sides, we got to do a better job, right, of giving employers exactly what they want. Otherwise, why would they sit over 1 out of 40? They're going to hate 1 out of thousands that they're going to work with. You better give them what they want. And then if you can do that, then there's a two-way conversation that's happening. Otherwise, both sides are going to castigate, and ain't nothing going to happen in the middle. So I think we all have to do a better job, to be honest.
You brought in worker voice. I feel like you, and actually, like everybody's close to workers in their efforts, but how do you help? Like, I feel like we vacillate between very demand side and then very supply side, and there's, in some ways, it's almost like two ends, and there's translation problems in the middle. Like, how do you help folks who are navigating those types of bridges and translations be more effective?
It's hard. We had the fortune of having a survey panel of over 5,000 users that we can survey on a fairly regular basis to get statistically significant data on what's happening to these workers in real time, hopefully longitudinally over time. It's actually a really powerful tool. And what you learn a lot of cool things from this. The thing that we learn a lot, going back to motivations, is that workers have a lot of doubt. And our job is to help them, we have a saying, to help them doubt their own self-doubt. And that comes to what workers are telling us. Doing that is ridiculously hard, right? But that's a key insight, which gets to motivational behaviors way beyond just skills, right? Which I think this idea of motivation is really important. And so we have that panel that we can leverage to say, here's the worker voice, and we can feed that up, right, back to employers and say, hey, these are what we're hearing from employers. And then you can start a conversation and be one of the thousands that they're going to work with, right, hopefully, right? Because we have that access, right, to workers in real time.
So my last sort of lightning round of questions for folks is just, we talk a lot about sort of how we're not making progress fast enough. And in many respects, I think we are making progress, but we have more to go. What either is inspiring or excites you about this moment in time? Like, what are you excited about? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we have taken a pretty big first step around destigmatizing the non-traditional path. And I think companies like Grainger that are kind of leading the way on that, that's an important first thing. Somebody's got to go first. And at the same time, we are putting in place the programs that, all right, if you didn't start on that traditional college first and then career path, there's now a lot of thought going into what are the skills programs that need to sit alongside an employee that really facilitates lifelong learning over a 60-year career. That's pretty new, and that's a pretty big step. We haven't figured out all the how and the skill taxonomy, and yeah, we could be going faster on a lot of stuff, but that's a really important first step, and I think there's some great trends that are going to accelerate us from here.
Love that.
Yeah, when I think about our company in the last few years, I was reflecting on 40% of our vice presidents across our company are in a new role than they were a year ago. And most of those are cross-functional. And what excites me is that creates a ton of movement within their teams because they're more open to people from different areas to come in with transferable skills. I also think we have this dynamic going on where there's a shortage of skilled workers to move into roles. And so it's a really exciting time to partner with companies to help define what is it that you need people to have, and let's do that work together to kind of prepare them to be able to step into those roles.
For me, I think there are two things that I think are interesting. One, I think the narrative is starting to change a little bit. Like if we were sitting in this room 10 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting in this room because no one would be talking about this kind of stuff. But these people are talking about it. Very slowly, but we're talking about it, led by these companies and Guild and some others and Burning Glass. So I think that's exciting and built. The second thing is, and this is where I give kudos to Debbie and Burning Glass, is data-informed decisions, right? So there's a lot of data out there that's informing key decision points. That's real, like real kick-ass data, right? That's actually really cool. And I think that's going to be a game changer, plus Gen AI. I'll just say that at the end, right? So I think data plus narrative is where hopefully it comes together, and that we don't have to sit here 10 years from now, right? We won't have this I doubt it, but we'll see. Yeah.
I will add that I think narrative change is, we are past the phase of sort of having to shout from the rooftops that this topic is important. That has allowed us to start to move to what and data informed. Right. And that is where you see the pace of innovation and solutions and work start to really coalesce and make their way into policy and practice and become embedded into large employers and all those things. And I think one of my message from our skills-based report, which I was a little nervous about because I've been in this field for a long time, and I don't want these measures to be seen as a disincentive for folks. Okay, we tried and we failed, so let's move on, which there's a little bit of a risk for that. In fact, we have finally started to be able to measure progress, and we are starting to see it take hold. We have more to do, like a mandate that we should be going further faster. But I'd like us to be able to see that the data that we have now allows us to be informed into where we can prioritize, how we can help workers make more informed decisions that are not one size fits all, how that can match to the priorities of your company, where we're not saying you need to care about this specific outcome. It's more like, does this outcome match the practices and the investments and where you're headed as a company? So it lets that match take shape. So I know we're about to run out of time, but I would like to take a moment to thank our panelists for this incredible discussion. And I hope that folks hear this panel and think about where is employer voice, where is skills first happening throughout this, this conference, and how can we take these types of lessons into the world of work that we have every day. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.